the trouble is that when you don't have a PowerPoint presentation, people are still thinking and looking at the earlier PowerPoint presentation. So I wanted to just wipe it off the screen. Thank you, Dr. Parimal and other colleagues at the MITSOC. It's a pleasure to be here with Professor Sanjay Kumar and Dr. Rahul Verma this morning amongst you to talk a little more about what it means when a kind of landslide happens in a state assembly election. Not that we are not accustomed to landslides from time to time. Many states have witnessed this, and you already have a lot of reference to that data from what Rahul mentioned. For Maharashtra also, for example, this 80% what is called strike rate is somewhat rare in these days, but not unheard of. Rahul, you mentioned 1972. That was the time when Congress won 222 seats out of 270 that time. So that comes close to the BJP's performance today. And that is really the starting point with which I would like to begin. In a sense, both the presentations so far have helped us understand how this has happened. Both the presentations have told us where, for example, the advantages of the Mahayuti lay and where the disadvantages of the Mahavikas Aghadi have stumped them. It is also true that when an alliance wins or a party wins, as Rahul succinctly pointed out, everything seems to be right with that party. And when an alliance is wiped out, a party is wiped out, everything that party did seems to be wrong. So let us sort of move away from that. Both the presentations have also pointed out the strongholds of the Mahayuti. In a sense, Sanjayji's presentation has also busted the myth that only women voters have made the difference. If you looked at that slide very carefully, you will find that 3 percentage points extra women voted than men for the BJP. That couldn't have resulted in this kind of a landslide. So it's in a sense what Rahul pointed out, and I will come to that later, flattening of the support from different social sections. So what I would really like to do is not to dwell upon this result for the next maybe 10 minutes or so and take you backwards, because this result needs to be situated in the politics of the state over a long period of time. Of course, one can argue that this was a major shift, and I would agree with that. But even when a shift occurs, we need to look at what is the extent of that shift, what was changing over time. You would recall Rahul was referring again and again to the decline of the Congress over time. So obviously this wasn't a surprise. The surprise probably was earlier when the Congress didn't do so badly in 2004 and 2009, not today. So looking at Maharashtra's politics, the state was formed in 1960. So broadly, you can make two parts of this history from 60 to 95 and 95 to present. But within these two phases, there were again two sub-phases every time between 1960 to roughly 76, when the Congress dominance was in a sense so intact, and that's why I mentioned 1972, that no other party could think of reaching a level where they would compete with the Congress on an equal footing. That was unlikely, unthinkable till 1975-76. The next phase, like the phase of Congress dominance nationally, was a phase of Congress dominance. Nonetheless, the Congress was having a weak dominance from 1977 onwards. It lost briefly, it split briefly, and finally we entered into a second phase of Maharashtra's politics in 1995, when for the first time the Congress actually lost. Once it lost the election, we might think that it is a continuous phase, but I would still break down the last 30 years from 1995 to today into two, because to my mind, 2014 is still a very important landmark in the history of electoral and competitive politics in Maharashtra. In this larger historical context, three elections in Maharashtra probably need a more careful attention in order to understand how competitive politics in Maharashtra got slowly transformed from time to time. I don't know whether the first one that I'm going to talk about should be called a critical election. It probably was a half critical election, that was 1978. 1978 was an election that took place in the backdrop of the emergency and the Janata Party coming to power, etc. But the social alignment that took place that time was incomplete. It was only, in a sense, occasioned by the rise of Janata Party at the national level and internal problems in the Congress Party, both at the national and the state level. It produced weak opposition, and it didn't produce a strong replacement of the Congress Party in 1978, as a result of which what we witnessed later on in 1999 also happened in 78, that different factions of the Congress came together to form the government, then separated against each other, and Sharad Pawar formed the PDF government, the Progressive Democratic Front government, but still led by his Congress Party. While the Janata Party then was the bulwark of support in the legislature, the leadership of that government still remained with the Congress faction of Sharad Pawar. Compared to that, 1995 actually completely fits into the role of a critical election. Critical election because first it fragmented the Maratha elite. A large number of rebels that time were stalwarts from the Maratha community who departed from the Congress Party, fought the election on their own, won the election, and then chose to join the BJP Shiv Sena alliance, which formed the government after 1995. Secondly, it also fragmented the Maratha voters generally. What we talk of today, or maybe yesterday we talked of, happened or started happening in 1995, that Maratha vote got fragmented. And since then it remained fragmented for almost 2 decades. So that fragmentation continued. And thirdly, the decline of the Congress, which had nationally started in 1989, started happening in Maharashtra, or it was in a sense rushed in Maharashtra from 1995 onwards. Since then, Maharashtra has never witnessed a strong Congress party. Congress governments have come and gone, but Maharashtra didn't witness a strong Congress party since 1995. Show me any strong state level leader of the Congress party post 1995, and you will find that that didn't happen. Show me a region of the state where the Congress party consistently remained strong after 1995, and again you will not find such a region. So the decline of the Congress, in a sense, was hastened or rushed by the 1995 elections. One may say thus that it was a belated impact of the overall Congress decline that was happening nationally since 1989. We probably know the history. Those of you who have studied or looked at Maharashtra's politics know that after 1995, an awkward coalition of the two factions of the Congress took over. Congress split in 1999, and then the two factions rejoined to form the government since 1999. Congress and NCP and Shiv Sena and BJP produced this bipolarity to the state politics. It as if seemed that there were two sort of coalitions, and that's where the question that Rahul was mentioning about squeezing of the remaining space for smaller parties comes up, and we will talk about that later. finally, and that is where probably I may disagree with many of you, the third critical election actually happens in 2014 rather than 2024. 2024 has the element of drama. 2024 also has an element of the unexpected. But the real alignments that changed started happening in 2014, and that was the time when, probably for the first time in Maharashtra's political history, it quickly aligned to the national or all India trend. Otherwise, as I mentioned earlier, it is always 5 or 10 years later that things happen in Maharashtra when they happen at the all India level. In a sense, the nature of Maharashtra's politics was such that it was sort of autonomous, and therefore it could resist the all India trend. Congress splits in 1969, but in Maharashtra nothing happens till 1977, for example. So that lag of 10 years was shortened in 1995 when it happened in 5-6 years. And in 2014, it happened just along with the all India trend, and therefore 2014 is the more important election for us to understand what is happening in Maharashtra. The assembly election in 2014 happened in the shadow of Modi's victory in 2014. If I am not mistaken, that time in Lok Sabha, the BJP actually had a Midas touch. Every constituency they contested in Maharashtra, practically every, I think they lost only one. Out of 24 they contested, they won 23. This is extraordinary by any standards, but particularly extraordinary by the standards of competitive politics in Maharashtra. In that backdrop, suddenly 2014 assembly election assumes importance because there was a breakdown in the bipolarity. The Shiv Sena BJP alliance on the one hand and Congress NCP alliance on the other hand was this awkward bipolarity that Maharashtra had witnessed for 15 long years. 2014 sees an end to that. Not today, not 2019, but 2014, because that was the time when all 4 major parties decided to contest on their own in the state assembly election. The process of Marathas and OBCs separately joining and supporting the BJP also shapes in 2014. Though, of course, the numbers would be less, percentages would be less. We have data from 2014 assembly election, and that shows us that gradually the BJP was able to attract a large number of Maratha and Maratha Kunbi votes in 2014, and OBC vote also. So this media created myth that Marathas will not vote along with OBCs and there would be a friction between the two. Actually didn't have a historical evidence, because in 2014 they both voted for the BJP. They might not have common agenda, they might have social political differences, but they saw BJP as the party that might help them push their own respective agendas. So 2014 is important in that sense also. So the social realignment that we see today, and if you recall Sanjay ji's slide on community and caste-based votes, you would recall that more than half the Marathas and more than half the Kunbis and almost 60% OBCs this time voted or said they will vote for the BJP. Now this looks so dramatic that we forget that this process had actually started taking place in 2014 itself. 2019 was, as it happens in movies, was an interval or a comic intervention. And after that, and though it was comic, it was important because 2019, what happened in 2019 was equally important because it reasserted the breakdown of bipolarity and coalition politics. The common serious joke in Maharashtra between 2014 and 2024 has been, you don't know who is with whom. And 2019 actually formalized that common joke, because in 2019, how many years it was? 30 years? 20 and 10, yes, 30 years. The 30 years old coalition between the Shiv Sena and the BJP collapsed again. It was not the first time that it collapsed. It was on the verge of a collapse even while one of the architects, Bal Thackeray, was alive, but they sort of mended their fences. Then it collapsed on the verge of 2014 assembly elections, and then in 2019, post-assembly elections, this coalition formally once again got dissolved, producing in the first place an isolation of the BJP, and in the second place later on, after 2 years, a reconfiguration. Two state-level parties split, join the BJP, and thus a new coalition politics begins. This entire talk of Mahavikas and Mahayuti, these two things, they become Maha because at both sides of the coalition, you have not two but three partners, and therefore everyone thinks that they are larger than life. So this breakdown, in a sense, happens between 2019 and then the splits in the NCP and the Shiv Sena later on after a couple of years, and thus the trends from 2014 get consolidated in this election. For example, in 2014 assembly election, if you combine the votes of Marathas and Kunbis, and for analytical purposes, I would want them to be combined because there is no evidence that Marathas and Kunbis politically behave differently. So I am combining them. Then 22% of them voted for the BJP alone in 2014. This time, 29% have voted for the BJP alone. The figures that Sanjay ji showed you are figures for the Mahayuti that combine the votes of Eknath Shinde group and the Ajit Pawar group also. OBCs, 34% OBCs voted for the BJP in 2014, 39 this time have voted for the BJP alone. In a sense, thus, what we find in 2024 is a continuation, sharpening and consolidation of the processes that have emerged or shaped originally in 2014. What are these processes? In one simple sentence, we can say that this is the process of the shaping of a new dominant party system. Again, this is not very different from what separately Rahul with Professor Pradeep Chibbar or I earlier have argued, namely that India is overall witnessing the rise of a new dominant party system. I have called it the second dominant party system. They have called it the BJP dominance system. But basically, we don't disagree on the analytical framework of this new party system that is emerging. So that is what is happening in Maharashtra. 2014 witnessed the emergence of this new dominant party system in Maharashtra. Historically, then you will find that if the earlier dominant party system in Maharashtra finally collapsed in 1995, then 2 decades after an interval of 2 decades, structurally, a dominant party system has resurfaced with different players playing different roles now, different social configurations obviously propping up this new party system. To conclude then, what does this new dominant party system mean and what is it likely to mean for the politics of Maharashtra? In both the earlier presentations, you have already, in a sense, got a glimpse into what it means. Since this is anyway the last presentation, I would take advantage of that and sum up from what both of them have said. Number one, and this is exactly the word that Rahul has already used, flattening of different specificities or fault lines. Regionally, Sanjay ji has shown you how in all regions there is a wipeout. Now, in next election, it might happen that in some regions, some other opposition party, either of these three, might assert themselves, quite possible. But basically, flattening means that a dominant party, and if BJP is the dominant party, in spite of its 28% limited vote share, it's a dominant party because if you look at other parties, they are far way behind it. So, BJP is emerging as the dominant party, or at least the dominant pole of this party competition, and there is a flattening, which means that losers lose in all regions, winners win in all regions. That's one. But more importantly, and that is the more important second part that I have been arguing, is that there is a shaping of a huge Hindu umbrella in the state. State after state this is happening. Maharashtra, this is happening now since 2014, and 2024 has in a sense shown that that Hindu umbrella with all its three colors, because it has three parties currently, quite bright colors. What is this Hindu umbrella? It is a Hindu umbrella where SCs, scheduled caste voters, slightly hesitate, but not much in supporting the Hindu umbrella. Sanjay ji's slide, where there is a three-way split in the Dalit vote or the SC vote, a large chunk going to others, and that is where our differences would crop up, Rahul, about others. A significant chunk getting divided between Mahayuti and Mahavikas Aghadi. But they don't mind voting for the dominant pole or the dominant coalition. Adivasis similarly split, divided basically. Again, recall Sanjay ji's slide. Adivasis getting divided between Mahayuti and Mahavikas. I think 55 and 41%. Mahayuti getting 41, Mahavikas Aghadi getting 55. So division. And it's a Hindu umbrella. Sanjay ji's slide showed something like 20+% votes for the Mahayuti. But if you further split it by party, only 5% Muslims vote for the BJP. And everywhere, Jharkhand is another example, Haryana is yet another example. In every place where this Hindu umbrella opens up, it keeps excluding the Muslims, or you may say Muslims keep running away from it, either way. So, there is this sharp Hindu umbrella, looks very large, very daunting, but it is quite clear in its exclusion, just as it is quite influential in its incorporation of Hindu vote. That's the second. The third is, like in any dominant party system earlier also, the only way you can oppose politically a dominant party is by forming alliances. It's unlikely that any single party would be able to handle the pressure of dominance by a dominant party system. This is not only about the BJP, it's happening elsewhere also, wherever there have been other dominant parties. There have always been efforts to coalition formation. So Maharashtra's politics, party politics, will definitely turn necessarily into coalition formations. And this is ironical because while on the one hand the MVA is not a natural coalition as many observers call it, while every member of the MVA today would be wanting to run away from the MVA, while there are rumors already that the Shiv Sena led by Uddhav Thackeray wants to quit the MVA or has already quit, I don't know. Ironically, there is no other way but to form coalitions. They will split today, but they will have to reconfigure consequently in order to fight a dominant party system. In other words, and if you look at the Mahavikas Aghadi example, you will find that while coalition is a compulsion, coalition is also an impossibility. You can't form a coalition, but you have to form a coalition. That's kind of party competition that will shape in Maharashtra. Fourthly, the others. I will spend a couple of minutes making my difference of opinion with Dr. Rahul Verma. Yes, when coalitions of two equal size emerge, they tend to eat up the space of the others. However, in Maharashtra, because of this flux or the fluidity that we are likely to witness currently, and because of the inability of Sharad Pawar's NCP and Thakre's Shiv Sena to stand up to the BJP, because of the weakness of the Mahayuti, because in Mahayuti the two other partners would be really unwanted. They are practically what coalition students would call, it's a surplus coalition, almost a surplus coalition. You know, a surplus coalition means a coalition in which you are tolerated but not necessary. That's a surplus coalition. The Mahayuti is almost becoming like that with 130 plus seats to one single party. So, both Shiv Senas and both NCPs are weak, unstable, and unlikely to sustain the pressure. When politics enters into such a flux, smaller players, and by smaller players I here mean the really smaller players at the district level, are likely to imagine that they can withstand this pressure of the coalitions. And while in this election they have failed to do so, they are quite likely in the future to play an important role. Tamil Nadu, in a sense, gives us some indication of this. When you have two large Dravid parties, they still need a large number of smaller parties too. When AIADMK fails, the BJP emerges probably on the expectation of attracting many smaller players. So in Maharashtra's politics, and since many of you would be wishing and willing to go into politics, this would be a good news for you. You can form your own parties. Because very small players, single caste parties, single leader parties, single district parties will keep playing an important role for the next 5 years or more until this dominant party system settles down and produces its own other in terms of another coalition. So in the near future at least, that's a possibility. Finally, a dominant party system often produces a closure of ideas and programs. Everyone talks the same language, everyone talks of the same schemes, and no new ideas and schemes or programs or visions can emerge very easily. The opposition increasingly looks like the ruling party in terms of its ideas, its social character, and so on and so forth. So what I have argued, and therefore I would come to this last bit conclusion, what I have argued today in the Indian Express is something that we need to look for as far as shape of politics in Maharashtra to come. With one party being able to browbeat the partners in the coalition, with one party consistently winning over 1/4 of the votes, and with one party attracting different sections of the society, Maharashtra's politics is most likely to enter into a phase where that ruling party, that dominant party, will also dominate the social sphere. In a sense, Maharashtra would enter into a phase in which Gujarat has already entered maybe 20 years ago, in which the CPM-ruled West Bengal existed for a long time, in which Madhya Pradesh is now already ensconced, namely a party society politics or party society state, where the ruling party is so dominant that it dominates the socio-cultural. It of course has an excellent equation with the economic, and obviously it has an electoral edge. That's likely the most likely scenario as an outcome of a dominant party system if it stabilizes. You know, politics always has these limitations for analysts that it has its own momentum. What happened in 2014 looked like something that will continue. Suddenly there was a break in 2019. So I am not saying that this is something that can't be altered. Politics can alter itself, but unless and until politics alters itself, it will shape in this direction most possibly. Thank you very much.